This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
You ever notice how some of the biggest ideas in history just seem to pop up out of nowhere? Well, today we're diving into a real-life intellectual detective story, solving the mystery of how modern British philosophy suddenly appeared on the world stage. So here's the puzzle that has really stumped historians. For hundreds of years, you've got continental Europe building these massive, complex philosophical systems, but Britain, it kind of seemed to be sitting on the sidelines. And then bam! Right at the start of the 20th century, it just explodes onto the scene with a totally new way of thinking. So what on earth could have caused a shift that dramatic? I mean, look, it's not like Britain didn't have brilliant thinkers before 1900. You had giants like John Locke and David Hume, but they weren't really in the business of building these grand theories to explain all of reality. Nah, they were much more focused on things like politics, history, and really questioning what we can actually know. But then, everything changes. A new guard, led by guys like G.E. Moore and Bertrand Russell, shows up, and their weapons of choice? Not some abstract ideas about existence, but the cold, hard precision of math and logic. And this philosophical revolution, it was absolutely no accident. It was a reaction, a specific countermove that was triggered by a huge historical event. And to find the source of it, we've actually got to look outside of Britain altogether. Our investigation is going to take us across the English Channel to a nation that had just been forged in the fires of war, Germany. Okay, so you gotta remember this date, 1871. This is the big one. When Prussia defeated France, it didn't just create a new German empire, it created a whole new blueprint for what a modern, powerful nation could actually be. And this new German model was terrifyingly effective. I mean, it fused the military, the government, and the entire education system into one single, incredibly powerful machine. And right at the heart of it, the universities were the intellectual engine. Philosophy wasn't just some quiet academic thing anymore. It became the very language they used to build and justify the power of the nation itself. So all of a sudden, the rest of Europe starts looking at German philosophy completely differently. It wasn't just a bunch of abstract ideas anymore. No, it was the intellectual software running the most successful national hardware on the entire continent. It was, quite simply, the philosophy of a winner. So this intellectual German boom, as you can imagine, starts to spread, and its next big target was the academic world of Great Britain. This new, super prestigious German way of thinking, it lands on British shores, and it gets a new name, British idealism. And for a few decades, starting right around the 1870s, it just completely takes over the philosophy departments in all the major universities. It was the hot new thing. But here's the thing, this takeover was really only skin deep. It wasn't like a genuine conversion to German thought. British idealism was more like a fashionable German coat, just this thin veil draped over Britain's own, much older intellectual traditions. Because underneath that German veil, the real core of British thought was still there. Its deep roots in empiricism, the idea that knowledge really comes from experience. That, plus its focus on natural science, and just plain no-nonsense practicality. All of that was just waiting beneath the surface. And that thin veil of German idealism, well, it wasn't going to last very long, because a rebellion was already brewing, right in the heart of the British academic world. And that rebellion was led by two absolutely brilliant young thinkers at Cambridge University, G.E. Moore and Bertrand Russell. They looked at these grand, vague, sweeping statements of idealism, and they just found them intellectually offensive. Their weapon wasn't some other complicated system. Nope. It was a simple but relentless and totally devastating question. Whenever an idealist philosopher would make some profound claim about the nature of reality, Moore and Russell would just ask, "Okay, fine. Now prove it. Can you express that idea using the clear, unambiguous rules of logic?" And this wasn't just them talking a big game. It was a demonstration. In their massive, groundbreaking work, Principia Mathematica, Russell and his collaborator, Alfred North Whitehead, built the entire foundation of mathematics using only pure logic. They proved you didn't need these grand, fuzzy, metaphysical concepts to explain the most fundamental truths. And with that, German idealism was shown to be totally unnecessary. Intellectually, the fight was over. So at this point, you'd think that's it, right? British idealism had been theoretically defeated. I mean, it had no logical leg to stand on. And yet, it still wouldn't go away. So what gives? Why did this defeated idea just cling to life in British universities? If its arguments were so flimsy, why was it still so prestigious? Well, the answer had nothing to do with philosophy and absolutely everything to do with power. See, an idea's authority isn't just about its logic, it's propped up by the prestige of the nation it comes from. And in the early 1900s, Germany was still seen as the great European success story. Its ideas had clout. And then came the event that pulled the plug once and for all. The start of World War I, and Germany's ultimate crushing defeat in 1918. That changed everything. And this wasn't just a loss on the battlefield. It was seen as a complete and total failure of the entire German model. The whole system, the state, the military, the university, all integrated, was now viewed as a catastrophic mistake. And with Germany's fall from grace, the philosophy that represented it lost all of its authority, literally overnight. So, with the idealist infection finally gone, the last step for these British thinkers was to make sure nothing like it could ever happen again. They needed what you could call a philosophical vaccine. And this is where the third key figure of this whole story, Ludwig Wittgenstein, comes in. His work basically provided the final dose of this vaccine. By arguing that language needed to be crystal clear, just like the language of science, he created a powerful tool to just expel these grand, untestable theories. This built a kind of intellectual immunity, protecting British thought from what they now saw as dangerously vague and foreign ideas. So what we now call analytic philosophy, get this, it wasn't born as some new timeless tradition. It was created as an intellectual emergency device, a set of tools designed to solve a very specific historical problem: how to clean house after the collapse of the German boom, and how to protect British thought going forward. With that emergency over, British philosophy just went back to its roots, a focus on logic, science, and practical questions. The mystery was solved. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought that still hits home today. How many of our own most cherished ideas are tied to a worldly power? And what happens to those ideas when that power starts to fade?
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.